People require access from anywhere to resources everywhere, but legacy security is ill-equipped for today's hybrid organization. Appgate SDP delivers zero-trust network access for hybrid workforces and workloads, empowering trusted users with secure, frictionless connections to only what they need. Make your attack surface invisible and reduce time to provision by 91% with Appgate SDP, a leader in the 2021 Forrester ZTNA New Wave. Learn more at securitywweekly.com/Appgate. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. And Milo's in my lap right now, so just so you know, my cat decided to join us for this segment. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. Also, we had an absolute blast putting together this year's Security Weekly Unlocked virtual event. Actually, it was last year's. All presentations are now available on demand for your viewing pleasure. Please visit securityweekly.com/unlocked to register and watch now. All right, gentlemen, first set of articles for the year. No Log4j, no 2021 like lessons learned, no 22 predictions. I don't do that, as you guys know.
No resolutions, none of those resolutions.
No resolutions, none of that, none of that, right? However, we got to catch up on a couple things around football. So,
yes.
First of all, speed matters, Michigan. When you decide to play an SEC team, you cannot just decide to power the football like you do in the Big Ten. Lesson number one, which is why the Buckeyes have recruited the way they have the last few years. Yes, they lost the big game, but they show up when it comes to the SEC occasionally. Okay. And then pro football, you guys are great. Between what the Cowboys are doing and what the Patriots are doing, awesome. The Browns and the Denver Broncos have to go through rebuild seasons yet again. That'll be like 6, 7, 8 years
I was gonna ask Milo how Dad feels about those Broncos. That was gonna be my question for Milo.
Gosh, just crazy. Crazy. All right, now we can get to articles. So first article. All right, first article. This is almost a summary of 2021. This is a think tank discussion reframing the CISO boardroom relations, which we covered a lot of these articles last year. So you could almost classify this as a summary. It wasn't intended to be that at all. But I'm going through this and I'm like, but where are the tips? Like what is the reframing? And you don't get to anything of real substance, I don't think, until you get to like the last paragraph of the article, which is ultimately the responsibility for security decisions is vested in the CEO, while it is the CISO's role to influence. That's the one line I pulled out, Matt. That's it. Like this whole article. I pulled one line out.
We need to convince the CEOs that they are accountable. That's what I pulled out.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So does that mean that's how we're reframing the board discussion? Is we just have to make it clear to the CEO that it's his job?
I guess we got to offer some clarity because ultimately it is, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the board. It's the responsibility of the CEO. And I love the comment, right? I love that one comment that I pulled out is ultimately the responsibility for security decisions is vested in the CEO, while the CISO role is to influence and inform. Dead on.
Right. exactly right.
Yeah, I think the overall issue here, though, is a lot of CEOs don't see it that way, right?
No,
it's funny because it's their number one risk in many cases. They'll admit that it's their number one risk, but it's not treated with that level of importance. So, right. The framing was interesting in the article.
Yeah, it was, and that's why I was like, "That's interesting," but okay. You could have wrote that paragraph and called it a day. Like all the other words didn't do anything. So then we move to the next article, why CISOs should report to why CISOs shouldn't report to the CIO.
To the CIO, right. And I think that last article is going to support it, Matt, because here's the thing. The CEO will never realize they're accountable and have skin in the game if there's a filter of the CIO. if there's a filter there, it's never going to get to that point where the CEO
or any filter, really, right? I mean, that's kind of the issue. I mean, it gets down to that. What is the level of importance you're dealing with this issue at the CEO level? And I think it's almost got to be a direct report. I mean, there can be arguments made. It shouldn't be the CIO, so it's got to be somebody else. And I think depending upon the temperament and the manner of the CEO, like what they're going to gravitate towards, but ultimately, like, given the level of importance, it's something they should be taking as a direct report importance level.
100% agreed.
Exactly. And even to the point where I brought this next article in, because this one makes the case that the CIO should actually report to the CISO. So think about this for a second, right? We remove the filter of the CIO, move the CISO into a more direct relationship with the C-suite, the CEO, the board, etc. Does the CIO become his peer, or does the CIO report to the CISO?
I'm seeing this more and more. I mean, I've seen a couple companies, that I made a recent transition, and that's part of the discussions that I'd had with some companies around, potentially the CIO reporting up under the CISO. I had a conversation with a really seasoned CISO this weekend that's thinking about a move, and the move he's thinking about, that's potentially what they're looking at, is having the CIO report to the CISO. Yeah. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense.
I 100% agree. And I went through this in my past, my past job, right? Where I was the CISO of the organization, and we were able to transform our security program to a degree where the CEO came to talk to me to taking over IT holistically, right? So the success of security and the oversight that security brought to the table, the trust that we brought in front of our customers ultimately put us in a position to take over the entirety of the IT responsibility for the organization. So that's where the CIO and CISO came to bear, and I would not have that CISO title pulled. It was part of the stipulation with the CEO that, listen, I'm always going to be the CISO of this organization, even though I'm taking on IT responsibilities overall, because that's the most important piece of this, to make sure that we're doing everything with security in mind and it's built into the DNA of this organization.
And we've talked about this before on here, right? Where the CISO is becoming more of this business line executive. In order to be successful, you have to talk in more the native language of the business. And I think that's the outcome here, right? As that CISO becomes more of that business line executive, then they're paired with the ability to understand risk and really make those critical risk-based decisions. And that natively falls into where the CIO is going to be asked to handle things as well, right? I mean, you're thinking about things, okay, well, what's the risk if we don't do this business initiative versus we do? It's the same decision. It's just, a different area of responsibility. So I think this is a native extension and evolution of where things go.
Agreed. And Jay, we've talked about it on the show before. What type of CISO are you, right? Because there's certain CISO personalities, I guess you could say, because we talked about the transformational CISO, the post-breach CISO, the tactical CISO. I think it's a natural transition for the likes of a transformational CISO, coupled with the customer-facing evangelist, because you can go out there and promote to the rest of the business and promote to customer base. So I think there's a certain skill set that you need to be able to take on that level of responsibility and own the entirety of the IT responsibilities as well. But if you're that transformational CISO, that's right in your wheelhouse, right? It's definitely something that you should be thinking about.
And I think on that same line, if you think about people who are maybe, the steady state guy, right, or the post breach guy, I mean, that that may naturally bring you into kind of like a deputy CISO role, right? Where you're kind of forming more of the core functions of the CISO, and the overall CISO is handling more of that strategic and risk advisory level.
Yeah.
I like how JJ framed this at the end of the article. He says, the case can be made that the emergence of the CISO role and its separation from IT operations is a primary reason for many of today's cybersecurity failures. And I think back when I was at Qualys and Tenable and other places, right, where the security team would identify the vulnerability and then they'd have to throw the report over the wall to the IT operations guys to go patch it, and they don't patch it and they wonder why the systems get hacked. Like, he makes a very valid case here that by separating the two, we actually created more issues around securing our IT infrastructure than we did in fixing it. Therefore, if the CIO reported to the CISO, and one of the priorities of the CIO was to address security vulnerabilities as part of the IT operational side, we'd be in better shape. And I think that's a very interesting case to be told.
It is 100% hashtag truth, Matt. Because one of the first things when I was able to take the CIO role and really run with it, being a security-focused CIO and CISO, was to integrate the entirety of the IT department into the security best practices, right? Yeah. So in essence, what we had a security practitioner in every single IT role. If you were a network admin, you were integrated with security and doing security work, right? If you were a server admin, you were doing security work. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody became a cybersecurity professional within the IT department, not just the security team. They were one and the same, embedded.
And I think the native direction that goes, the journey that takes us on, if you extend that, is things like cloud and dev, and where those are outside the realm of the traditional CIO. And I think the CIO has been somewhat isolated. Looking at the CISO sitting at an overarching level, you can start bringing that stuff back under them and have truly like not an information technology, but a technology structure that actually supports a secure development, secure infrastructure, secure network. Its overall security is embedded in everything. To your point, it's that native security champions program that's rolled out throughout the entire technology stack.
Right, and it gets back to the name of the role, the chief information security officer, right? Because there's information around all these other areas that have to be integrated in together, right? I mean, that's the point of it.
100%.
Yeah. Next article, let's see. 6 ways to reduce cyber risks in the C-suite. Notice the theme, a little C-suite-ish today. That's because I wasn't covering the 4 million other articles on predictions and resolutions for the year. But I thought it was interesting to think about, to consciously think about reducing risks in the C-suite, because I don't think we think about it in how do you reduce risks across my C-suite environment and address this holistically. We think of it as maybe the CEO and the board and the CISO, but where's the rest of the C-suite engaged in the conversation? This kind of highlights some of the things that I think need to be discussed and thought about internally in organizations.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would add in here, and there's one I would probably adjust a little bit as well, but it talks about discussing cybersecurity in the board meeting, so you can have that conversation across the business units. It talks about evaluating business risks and cyber threats. What it doesn't talk about is embedding security into the other business units, right? And I've said it before. We have, I've had liaisons in business units where, and Ben's talking about the business security officer, right? The BSO, just to have security embedded within the department. So that way it's a conversation during all of the business unit meetings. Security is part of their DNA and what they're talking about to run the business and run that business unit. I would have added that to this. And the other one I would adjust is, number 4, which says increase cybersecurity budgets. Well, you can't do that with a hatchet. What I would say is right size, or make sure you're spending in the right areas, right? Before you start increasing cybersecurity budget, because maybe you're not spending in the right areas. Maybe there could be silos between business units. It's
a lot of spend on the wrong stuff, right? I mean, it's funny when you walk into an org and you see what's actually going on and what's been spent. It's not necessarily they don't have the budget; it's that it's misaligned. I think a lot of companies do underspend percentage-wise. But yeah, the misalignment's a big problem. For me,
I mean, because if we walk in the door, Ben, if we walk in the door and say, give me more money, we're going to get the stink eye.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the first thing that's going to happen is the stink eye. Well, why? Tell me why. Yeah. Tell me what you need. Tell me what's not right. Tell me what we need to invest in. And if you don't have your A game when you're coming to the table, and there's misalignment across the business units and how they're spending in the cybersecurity budget, you're spending, good money over bad, and it's not going to add value to the organization.
Yeah, the thing that called out for me again, we wrapped it up kind of that last line here. Like a third of CSOs and other board level security experts believe the CEO is the biggest barrier to improving cybersecurity, and that maybe puts too fine a point on it. But I think holistically, the same thing you talked about, Jason. It's if you're not given the authority, if you're not given access to the board, if you're not given the right budget, or you're not allowed to manage security. Like that does all roll up to the CEO. And I think, in those organizations where the structure is that the CISO reports to the CIO or he's down level, like, again, that's the perspective of the CEO. And that's something that people really need to evaluate when they're looking at these roles and how security is structured, and boards should look at. Like they should be asking those questions of the CEO. How are they addressing that risk, that cyber risk in their environment? And I think the answers they give are really sometimes telling about, where they really see the alignment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the budget side, I used to talk about this in presentations when I was out doing presentations, like how much are you spending on like antivirus and older technologies that you have these maintenance? Are you investing security controls in cloud and applications and identity and the things that are transforming, like, right? And so I think a lot of it from a budget perspective is making sure you're spending on the right stuff, because there are new areas that have to be accounted for. And it may not be you need to spend more overall, you need to shift budget, because as I go through, because I'm going through our budgeting process now, not from a security perspective, but I have to re-educate my president and my CEO on why I'm making decisions around budget based on my revenue plans to drive the business, right? If you build a financial model that shows the costs associated to drive the revenues, then you don't get into this tit for tat, like, well, you can't spend money there. Well, if I can't spend the money there, then I can't drive the business here. So which one do you want to get rid of? See, we got to think like that as CISOs too.
Yeah, 100%. And the other side too is, go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just saying you have to start with the justification for it, right? I mean, if you start with, I need X versus, hey, if we want to be successful in this business direction, here's the investment that we need to do that, right? And if they don't want to make the investment, okay, then you're telling me that we don't want to be successful in this area. I mean, it's the justification that's really important, not the underlying spend. Although, I mean, there is balance there, but I think if you miss the justification piece of it, you'll never get the allocation.
Yeah, right. And ultimately, this is where it's going to benefit security leaders to speak the language of the business, right? Because when I'm going after funds or investment, I'm going to do the diligence around it, and I'm going to start having conversations around EBITDA and how I can either help drive revenue or create operational efficiencies, right? Yep. Here's a good way to get something to happen. Maybe, for larger organizations who have subsidiaries and you're a parent company and you have all these different businesses that fall under your organization, go look for economies of scale. Maybe you have 5 different EDRs out there. If you consolidated them, you could maybe save some money, right? Look at third-party vendors that you're using. You may have, one SIM SOC vendor here and one SOC vendor there and a separate SIM there. Consolidate, get operational efficiencies, start helping drive the profitability of the organization, right? These are the conversations you need to be having. Now you're showing value back to the business from a business perspective, from a financial perspective. They're looking at you as someone who takes the finances of the organization very seriously, and you're looking at ways to save money so you can invest better.
Back to understanding the business, right? Because if you understand the business and how the business works and operates, and you understand key initiatives for the upcoming year, now you can align yourself to those and either show, a faster way to market to drive that revenue, a cost saving by consolidating and streamlining things. That requires you to understand the business.
That's why it's so important to have the seat at the table, right? I mean, so many CISOs that, I hear, well, it's okay that I'm not there. I'm worried about the security. Yeah, but if you don't understand the strategic initiatives of the business, you don't understand how to align yourself and make those plays that Jason was talking about to, hit the underlying, the EBITDA or, the strategic initiatives that the company's trying to address. I mean, that's why you have to be part of those discussions.
I'll tell you, if you're a CISO right now and you don't have a copy of the business plan or the strategic plan for 2022, get on it. If you don't know, now you know. Go get a copy of the strategic plan for the organization so you can start aligning to those high-level goals that the business has. They'll probably outline 4 or 5 top-level goals that they're trying to meet. Align your entire program to one of those or all of them.
Yes, and it changes the budget discussion, right, Jason? It changes your 100%. Discussion about how you're getting funded if you can align with those things.
That's it.
Exactly. While you're at it, can you go grab your travel security program? Do you have one? Like, I was reading this article and I was thinking, like, this is really interesting information. I just wonder how many people actually have a travel security program. And in over the last 2 years, maybe you didn't need one, but I'm curious. Do either
time to dust it off? Time to dust it off.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been embedded in IT services for a very long time now, and travel is just nature. It's part of the business. I mean, everybody traveled overseas and internationally, nationally. So having those best practices when it comes to employees who are traveling, it's just been ingrained in everything I've done for well over a decade at this point. So yeah, something I've definitely had in our best practices, no doubt.
Well, I remember when I was...
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say real quick, I remember when I was traveling for RSA, and I remember going to Turkey with Art Coviello and the security requirements we had when we went there. And then we went to Abu Dhabi and, different risk profile, different set of requirements, right? And I kind of forgot about those days because I just don't travel enough internationally anymore. Like,
seems so long
understanding
ago.
Country risks and stuff, like, things have had to have shifted over the past few years too. So like, you got to dust it off and kind of refresh.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, you should be, especially if you're doing things like geo-blocking, you should be understanding the countries of risk every year and doing some level of a review every year. I mean, I know that's something that I've done. And, with geo-blocking, you would have protocol and procedure for employees who are traveling to high-risk countries, right? And we'd go through our process and procedures to make sure they could go do work, but they were still safe.
Yeah, and again, why it's key to understand the initiatives of the business. If you're planning to start up operations in China, you better understand the difference.
You better know
business in China, right? I mean, don't be surprised by it. Where we've been sending executives there for 6 months. That's something I think you got to be on top of.
Right. Last article, I pulled this up for you, Jason. This is a great article. Sunil Yu wrote an article about, is cybersecurity a profession or a vocation? And he makes some great points in this article, and I wanted to cover it because, we've tracked Sunil for his cyber defense matrix, and Adrian's done a lot of work with him, et cetera. But he makes a very good point in that in other industries, whether it's military, healthcare, technicians, you have professionals and you have vocational jobs. And in cybersecurity, we think everything has to be a profession, but does it? Because other industries have vocations that don't require full degrees, medical assistants, LPNs, the list goes on and on and on, where you don't need full-blown degrees. And he's making a very valid point that should we think about certain jobs as vocational jobs, not as professional jobs? And will that help us fill the skills gap?
So here's the one thing I want to say coming out of this, right? And I love this article because this is a passion of mine. The one thing I would change is it's not an or, it's an and. Because it can be a vocational job and then become a professional job. The goal is, and I'm, I've said this before on the show, I am the prime example of that high school student who had no idea what the hell they wanted to be when they were graduating high school. So we joined the military. Thank you, Lord above, for the ASVAB test. If it was not for the ASVAB test, I would have never known I had an aptitude for technology. Boom, done. How do we get that aptitude test as early as we possibly can? I was not built for college at 18 years old. I just wasn't. I was built for college when I was in my mid-20s, right? When I got out of the Marine Corps. Now I was ready for it. How do we take kids who are in high school, students in high school, get them to the point where we know they have an aptitude for technology and or cybersecurity, both, right? And get them on a path to get a job out of high school. Make them career ready after 12th grade. Then when they feel they're mature enough and they know where they want to focus and they want to go to school and actually invest money, they can if they want to. If not, they still have a career path and they can still become professionals through that career path. Mm-hmm. It's not an or, it's an and.
Yes. Jason, I'm glad you jumped into that because I wasn't really interested in where you would come out. I had a feeling, but this is a really hot button topic for me. And for those that don't know, I actually don't have a bachelor's degree, right? And so this is near and dear to my heart. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of potential. And, for whatever reason, we have focused on everybody needs to have a degree. Everybody needs to, from high school, go into, college, graduate with a degree and go into debt. And, for some of us, that just wasn't possible going into debt. And, we had to figure out another way around it. And so, from my own internal perspective, I think that I didn't like the article in terms of it. It said, look, hey, you can be a technologist and be vocational. And then another track is professional, and that still requires a degree. I think a degree is just, it's one path, right, to get there. But ultimately, just because you don't have a degree doesn't mean that you can't succeed. And I think we need to look back for where security started. And there weren't degrees when I was going to college. There weren't degrees really for people who wanted to have a security career. You could certainly be, go for programming or, some other IT related track, but it's not something, I started with a programming degree in college with a CS degree. Not something I would really use in the track that I'm in now. Like many other degrees, I might as well have gotten a business degree or, a marketing degree. It wouldn't have mattered for where I am now. However, I think foundationally, it's just important to have a good foundation to develop skills and then, keep progressing, keep learning along your track. And I think, there are things out there, there are degrees out there now for people who want to have a security track, and that is one path. But I've seen a lot of people over my career that didn't have degrees that I would hire in a heartbeat and are great professionals. And so I think that there's a need to get back to vocational training here, whether it's, welding, plumbing, electrician, or, technology related. It's an option and a path for a lot of people out there who don't want to go to college or, can't fund college and, learn on the job and put a lot of time and effort and come out in a very positive end result.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing your story because again, it just shows how it's not, like I said, it's not an or, it's an and, right? You can go into IT or cybersecurity as a vocation to begin with, and then mature the hell out of your career and become a professional and become a leader, right? And I think that's important for people to understand. And I always think about how do we change the paradigm, because the educational system's still stuck in the old ways. Our hiring practices are still stuck in the old ways. Our HR departments are stuck in the old ways. The only way I can see for us to shift this and really flip it on its ear is we as security professionals who are passionate about this need to get involved at every level we possibly can. I'm embedded with Rhode Island Department of Education. I have monthly meetings talking about computer science and career pathways. I'm meeting with superintendents around our state about CTE programs. I'm part of Rhode Island College's board, where an advisory board on cybersecurity. It's embed yourself everywhere you can to influence, because we have to change this. We have to change the paradigm.
I'm the opposite of Ben, right? I actually have 2 degrees and I don't use either one. Because because there wasn't a cybersecurity degree. Cybersecurity, guys, remember, 96, I start thinking about security and antivirus and firewalls. Like, I learned on the fly. So if you want to think about it from the purely opposite end, Ben, for a second, right? I had 2 degrees that I don't use, and I still had to learn from the grassroots all the way up through my career, because there was no place to get formal education on this. Now, it's better today than it ever has been, but it doesn't have to be the only path, because people have learned this over the past 25 plus years in a space that's continually evolving. And so you can learn it on the fly. You do not necessarily have to have a degree in this space.
And that's one of the challenges. Like, I think a lot of people rail against the fact that, we see so many job descriptions where they ask for entry level people, but there's associated experience required, right?
Yep.
And people rail against that. But the problem is, even if you went into a really good cyber program, after you get out in 4 years, the data you learned is 4 years old, right? And so there's this constant evolution and constant change in the industry that's going on, and it moves so fast. It's hard to say there's a programmatic way to learn this. Like, there's a good way to get a good foundation, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I like when I'm looking for someone to fill an entry-level SOC role, somebody who's actually done some stuff and has some experience and can walk me through over the last 12 months how they've seen interesting things and how they've addressed them, and their thought process to how they work through a problem, much more interesting to me than a cyber degree.
Oh,
that's not to say it doesn't carry weight.
There have been so many instances where I've had the opportunity to bring someone in from a university, and then it takes 6 to 8 months to get them up to speed with their feet under them. I've also had the opportunity to have interns who were in high school programs that I would have hired if they decided they wanted to go full time when they graduated, because they were taking cybersecurity programs in high school. They were doing internships and learning on the job. It's just different. And I would have hired that high school intern over a college graduate, just because I could put them to work right away without having to retrain them.
Back to hands-on training and vocational education and internships, right? Yeah. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are going to be recording every week in 2022, including holiday weeks, which means we have a slightly modified schedule. That means we'll see you again on Friday on Business Security Weekly.